Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's August 30th, 2023. I'm Jason Weil, and this is the JupyterLab weekly call. We've got how many people? 13 people on the call today. I'll paste the agenda one more time into the chat for anyone who is just joining us. We've got a few people on the agenda today, starting with Eric G. Go ahead, Eric.
Hey, so there's now a documentation working group proposal up on the JupyterLab Team Compass. So we need you. So we're looking for people to help get this group bootstrapped to get it up and running. So if you're interested in working on documentation related tasks, please go ahead and check out that link and add a comment to the issue. So there's more details there, but as we had talked about in the previous meeting, for anyone who watched the previous meeting here, major focuses will probably be writing docs, connecting with the community to get people information they need, and then thirdly, gathering feedback from the community about what needs to be documented. So there's a number of early first work targets, and on some of it's writing documentation, but there's other non-writing documents tasks too, like adding tests to the CI to ensure that the tutorial commands are valid and don't break. There's trying to automate some metrics gathering from Read the Docs, because Read the Docs has its own built-in traffic monitoring system, and it looks like we can fetch CSVs from there, so we could potentially set up an automation for that, and a number of other things. So if you're interested in any of these kinds of tasks, yeah, we would appreciate you leaving a comment and noting your interest on the issue there. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for getting the ball rolling on this. We were talking a bit yesterday on Triage about this, and some of the documentation is really useful for people who are just getting started in Jupyter. When I started working on Jupyter almost 2 years ago, some of the first pull requests I made were to improve the documentation, and good documentation is a great way to encourage people to install Jupyter and also get started with contributing so they can join our community.
Yeah, I think we should be pretty quick to get a number of easy first tasks for anyone who wants to do them. And like you said, those will probably be really suitable for new people who want to come in. So hopefully that'll help the community. And I think, yeah, that's looking forward to having people come in, because we can also use expertise. So I'm sure if we get this bootstrapped, there's a lot of expertise out there, I know, and hopefully we can, soak up some of that knowledge and put it into the docs.
Yes, great. I also dropped the link to the Team Compass issue into the chat, so folks can comment, follow up with that. Thanks again, Eric.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm next on the agenda with a brief plug. The keyboard UX brainstorm for JupyterLab starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1700 UTC. Same Zoom channel as where we are right now. So if you're interested in like keyboard accessibility, we're going to be going through that. And by we, I mean, I believe Gabriel, who is on the call, is going to be leading that discussion.
Yep. Thanks, Jason.
And thank you for leading this, Gabriel. Okay, next up is Mehmet.
Hey everyone, I just have a quick update on JupyterLab Desktop. Last week I released a new version, 405-1, and this version upgrades the JupyterLab bundled version to 405, and it also comes with an Electron upgrade to version 26. Also in this version, I changed the application icons from the circular lab icon to the standard Jupyter icon, as this was discussed in some Team Compass GitHub issues. Now all the icons are the classic Jupyter icons. And it also has some bug fixes for the Python environment activation. I discovered some problems with the Conda sub environment activation and also Windows VN Python environment activation, and I fixed those problems. Yeah, that's all my update.
Thank you for working on that.
Sure.
I wanted to highlight that for 4.1, there was a pull request merged last week, which implements, syncing theme with system settings. I'm linking that in the chat, and I wonder whether that might conflict with what's in JupyterLab desktop. Just giving you a heads up.
All right, thanks. I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Okay, well, Mike, you are next on the agenda with a couple of topics. Want to go ahead?
Sure. The LSP extension beta release for JupyterLab 4, which is 5.00 beta 1, so beta 0, has been released, and it's been difficult to get there, but most of the features are working. So diagnostics, signature, rename, etc. One of the problematic things is completer, because there was quite a lot of work in refactoring the completion upstream API so that we don't have to swap the entire completer in the LSP extension, and that we can play nicely with other completion providers. Unfortunately, there is still quite a few bugs to be fixed, and I truly appreciate if someone's got time to look at them. Many of those are like, we know what's wrong, and there are hints in the issues to where the problematic code is. It's just a question of opening up a pull request, and I can help review this, but I will have reduced availability this month. And while on that topic, I don't know if there is enough of a representation to discuss that, but I wanted to see what are people's thoughts about merging individual features, LSP features, into JupyterLab core, partly to avoid having broken APIs in the future releases, partly because it seems that the expectation nowadays is that these things are in an editor without need to install a third-party extension. And since we're already shipping the LSP plugin, why not to include that? Go on, Mika.
So you're talking about making this a bundled extension, right? Basically.
Partially, yes, but probably that would be like each feature would be a separate package in JupyterLab core.
Can those be overridden in the same way that other plugins can be overridden? I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so then I think to me that makes perfect sense. Like you said, I think people expect that these days. So it sounds like a really sensible move to just put it in core.
Nick has his hand up.
I'm going to talk. I'm going to lower my hand. Raise my hand, lower my hand. It would need to ship with something that did something useful that we could validate against. So that's why I started over on the Jupyter Lite LSP Dilly. I think the lowest hanging fruit would be the JSON language server. Well, more specifically the YAML language server, but I think it can be tuned down to only use with that. Because then you could use that for right now, if you go into the advanced JSON settings editor, it tells you whether or not it's busted, but it just tells you it's busted. It doesn't show you where it's busted or anything like that. So that would be a very low-hanging fruit thing to get in there that would actually provide useful features to all of our users. I don't know how it ends in JSON 5 because no one even knows what JSON 5 is. So, but yeah, because we still are not going to ship a language server by default. Mike, as you know better than anybody else, like those things are super sensitive to versions. They use lots of weird junk. Like there's no guarantee that you're going to get a Jedi that works with the IPython Jedi or all that stuff. So there would still be things that wouldn't do anything because we have no way to ship. We have no way to anticipate what those would be. So really, it's only like what language servers can we ship? What language server features can we ship and test in a way that does not require, kernel specific stuff? Because, whatever. And then the other thing is that it would have to work with the iDrive thing that, or however JupyterLab collaboration, YJS, all that stuff. However it ships its stuff up there, it would have to just work seamlessly with that, and that is not the case today. So I think there are some impediments, and I don't know about doing that on the 4x lifecycle, but I would say that that would be a high value thing to be able to ship, and potentially due to how that would work with things like JupyterLite, that's also like, does JupyterLite just go in? Do we have ways to do in-browser language servers and in-browser kernels, all those kinds of fun things. So those are my thoughts there.
I certainly see the appeal of shipping a small language server just for the sake of testing that. I'm not sure whether this is necessary, but there is some appeal. My question is, if we were to move, say, diagnostics / inspections, or implement table of contents, I just linked that in the agenda, also sending the link in the chat. Provider or the client in say 4.2 release of JupyterLab, is there any downside other than that there is a new plugin that we need to maintain? Is there a downside that would block like JupyterLite or something?
Well, no, I mean it would be enabling that, right? So if that's I guess what I'm talking about. If the first light-like thing that we could ship would be in client servers, otherwise we're back into needing Node.js on a user's machine to get any value out of it.
Well,
or
there are servers
internal.
which do not require Node.js.
Right. Yes, but I mean, if you wanted, for example, the JSON language server, you would still need Node.js, right? Because it's implemented as a JavaScript package. But if we can make those lab extensions and ship an example one of the JSON one that would provide value to any user that wanted to use the metadata tools, right? Because then all of your metadata code mirrors would have, they wouldn't just tell you it's busted. They would show you it's busted right here. Just that would be a testing service. The other approach would be get language server like features over the language server protocol into a kernel like IPython. But that's so far been, there's been resistance to adding it there instead of bespoke WebSockets. So I don't see a problem in there being the functionality there, but if it still doesn't do anything without installing something else, and you can't even kick the tires on what that experience would be like in any of the incidental UIs, then it still really hasn't moved the dial very much. It's kind of like debugger, right? Like we got away with debugger because IPython added debugger eventually after Zeus, but then we could test the debugger without a whole bunch of other stuff, and it was against a first-party thing.
Yeah, so Spider depends on the PyLSP, and they are pinning the version to avoid breakages because of the dependency hell with Jedi and Parser.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Yeah.
I mean, that's one way to cut it to at least the Python user base, but then there are lots of people who use other language servers, and yeah, we wouldn't ship an R language server for sure because we don't have R runtime. Yeah, I see what you are saying. That it only provides value when there is language server, or even if it's disabled by default, if it's at least shipped and tested. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the money things that every user is basically stuck with in Jupyter are things like JSON, because we have JSON-based settings, Markdown, which don't get me started on Markdown language servers. That's nightmarish, but that could be value. Spell checking, spell checking is really cool. People like spell checking. So, hitting some of those and being able to ship them client side would obviate a lot of our pinning problems. You'd still be able to swap them out with the mechanisms that are in place. So we would ship a JSON language server, but then we'd be able to upgrade that with a third-party extension could replace it with a different language server or something like that. But I think if you're shipping the features, they should ship with something that allows you to try the features, because then we can test the features without. We don't need to make the runtime environment any more complex from a package dependency standpoint than it is on the Python side for doing, full-on integration testing. So that's my feeling. If we've gone long, we can table this. But
yeah. So the question is, what is the size implication on the bundle? But if it is disabled by default, and the recent work that has been done with deferred extensions might alleviate that, it shouldn't be that much of a problem. And then
yeah,
if we are only having like a JSON language server, which is minimal, then maybe it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, so LSP right now, the JupyterLab LSP beta package, the wheel clocks in at 1.5 megabytes, and and we ship the source maps. And that's a whole other thing that we could do. Like, I think it's actively hurtful to the developer experience that you cannot get source maps. We should probably ship another wheel that includes the source maps. And we discussed this on LSP as well, so that you can install, JupyterLab source maps, pip install JupyterLab source maps, and you will get an exactly pinned matching version of those source maps, so that when you're trying to debug, you're not looking at the nightmare. But we're not forcing every user to download. It's a lot. If you bring in the source maps for full JupyterLab, it's a big boy. So it's, just kind of that trade-off. But I would wager, even so, shipping JupyterLab LSP today would be probably in the neighborhood of 300 kilobytes added to the lab wheel, because lab does not duplicate because it's doing PyProject TOML stuff. And then the language server would be a bit on top of that, but I don't have that number handy right now. But if it actually made editing like, because the form is nice, having the schema form is nice for manually updating stuff. But if you're, if you're validating that something is proper, like, I wouldn't try and do Galata tests or whatever against JSON schema form, because you're mostly testing JSON schema form. Then you're not testing your data versus just testing JSON, So I feel like that would be an easier testing target. Like, we would have to solve these problems for real of what does it mean to hover over a place in a JupyterLab extension? What does it mean if you go-to definition of a setting variable, how could you see that? I don't even know if you can, I don't think there is a UI for looking at the JSON schema of a settings extension schema right now. So it would, you know, working on language servers that everybody's got to deal with would give us that ability to test those things robustly. And then they would probably work for other languages.
Okay. Let's discuss that over an issue. I will open an issue to get back to that and formalize the discussion. So the final point from me is about future completer improvements. One issue is asking for input on API design for things such as auto imports or snippet completion support. So this is how should the completer provider be enabled to offer these functions, whether this should be just a single method which is invoked after the completion has been accepted, or whether there should be a dedicated support for all of these features, even if we don't get this kind of information from kernels just yet. However, we can always try to incorporate support for that in the kernel protocol. The second issue is about how we should enable auto-completion configuration, and the last one is about auto-completion or auto-suggestion heuristics, which are both kind of rough edges of the new feature that was added in 4.0 to help with the LSP extension, and is generally available, but the user experience is not great by default. So it's partially a discussion of how things should look like, and if you have opinions, please share them on both of these issues. And the second to last item is about Copilot, or rather things which work as like Copilot, because it doesn't have to be Copilot. And my question is specifically to Jupyter AI team, whether they have any thoughts on how the completion provision by AI models should be integrated with JupyterLab. And here I mean both the inline hint kind of suggestion, which shows the grayed out text, which you can accept or not, and that could be implemented in core or in LSP or as a part of the completion provider API. But then whether the models should be configured in Jupyter AI or whether that should be a separate thing, this kind of high level thoughts on the architecture would be very helpful.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is that the code completers, like for Copilot or like AWS Code Whisperer, which, full disclosure, I work for AWS, so forgive me if I'm biased towards Code Whisperer. I'm not sure that all of these have APIs that we can even use. And if they do, I am very skeptical that the APIs would be like compatible with each other. Even with the simple text-based prompts that we've been using, I think, naively assume that the same prompt would be usable across multiple model providers. And what we've actually found is that you need to do a fair amount of what's called prompt engineering to make a prompt work for a particular model or a model provider. So it's going to require a fair amount of like fine tuning, assuming an API is even available, which I'm not sure that it is. The other thing is that Jupyter AI, one of the principles we used is that it only gives you an AI-driven response if you specifically ask for one. So if you ask it a question, it will respond, but it is not passively monitoring and indexing your code. We did that to improve user trust in it, that people wouldn't feel like especially a third-party language model is like spying on everything that they do. That said, we've gotten some feedback from users who want an AI, who want to opt in to having an AI model monitor their code, monitor their keystrokes, with the belief that the AI insight is going to be worth the perceived dangers of like transmitting everything you type to a third-party model. So I think it's going to have to be opt-in, but we certainly have people who seem willing to opt in to get the benefits. I'm curious how other people feel about it.
I completely agree on the point of having that opt-in, and we were even thinking about having like a toggle on the toolbar so that you can choose whether or not to allow continuous hinting based on any specific notebook. Yeah.
Yeah, there are, I'm going to try to pull up the Jupyter AI issues list, but there are a few issues on our repo which concern like, what was it, Copilot? Yeah, add Jupyter. Okay. I'll drop this into the chat. Issue 268 in Jupyter AI is adding code completions and suggestions. And it might be a good place for discussion. Another teammate of mine, David, who is not feeling well, so he's not on this call today. David was suggesting auto learning the project route, because another of Jupyter AI's features is that you can learn from local data and then ask questions about your local data to use retrieval augmented generation. And people are curious about could it just automatically learn everything that is in the directory that it's running from. So for example, you can ask it a question about notebooks or documentation or code under your directory. Again, should probably be opt-in, but I think people can see the benefits of it.
So if we were to implement a plugin which allows to display these hints in the editor, would Jupyter AI depend on that plugin to provide this as an opt-in feature, or should it be reversed so that, say, JupyterLab LSP or JupyterLab AI completion, a completely new package, depends on Jupyter AI and asks it whether there are any providers and whether they support completion provision? Which way around should we do that? And yeah, as you mentioned, there are no APIs. I'm just asking, like, how do we envision the future dependency structure?
Yeah, I think even things like the data modeling have to be considered. How do we do, for lack of a better term, meta modeling? How do we index, create a directory of AI models with their capabilities? Which ones can do completion? Which ones can do like code assistance? And a lot of this stuff is just being developed in isolation. This is why you have so many models coming out, is because there are people around the world working on this stuff for different spoken languages, programming languages, different scenarios. Some of these are open source. Many of these are commercial. Even if something's open source, you still have to host it somewhere. So there's a saying that from ice hockey that you have to shoot where the puck is going. You have to go skate where the puck is going, not where it is today. And when we're trying to plan things for Jupyter AI, we're trying to envision where things are going. And I'm going to be honest with you, we're not often correct about it. Predictions that we make can change on just week to week notice. So these are things that I think we're all going to have to pay attention to news, continue to monitor things, continue to have open discussions about these things. And even if we make an implementation, we're probably going to have to re-implement it in a short amount of time to go where we believe the large language model development is going.
So this kind of suggests to me that the approach of having a separate plugin, which maybe depends on Jupyter AI, maybe depends on JupyterLab LSP, is the right one, because that allows for like agile and frequent changes.
I mean, Jupyter AI wasn't even the first implementation of generative AI in Jupyter. A few other people, including Fernando, already had built and released lightweight plugins for like GPT and other LLM integrations. We are, in my opinion, and I'm obviously biased, the most centrally located to Jupyter, but that doesn't mean that we're the best or we're the only one or that no one else can build something new. I agree that this might eventually spawn a second plugin or a plugin more closely tied to LSP than to the core of JupyterLab.
I had an opinion on this. So I'd say that everything that has to do with code completion should rather live and like be coupled with LSP than with Jupyter AI, because currently in Jupyter AI we mostly work with large language models. So like we send prompts to them and we receive different responses and process them differently, which is like a different functions than auto completion management, and LSP does auto completion management. So like separation of concerns. Yeah, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's very good thoughts. So the reason why I'm asking is because most LSP servers that actually provide completions to LSP do not have integrations with various providers. And I know that's what Jason mentioned, that it's all being developed right now and there is no single standard for how the APIs, how the language models communicate with outside world. And Jupyter AI already implements some wrapper around standard practices, whether this is using LangChain or not, but potentially it could offer a stable API and LSP could ask about the models, or we could just ask for standardization and for these things to show up spontaneously in various language servers, but this might never happen. But then I also see a case for having that to live in LSP, because we need to decide, depending on whether there is a suggestion from language model, whether to show the completer or not on every keystroke. Otherwise, there is like two actions and user doesn't know which one they will accept if they press enter or some other keystroke.
Well, it's exactly the same problem as the JSON language server, right? If a given document could support multiple language servers that existed at different places, so there could be one that's running inside a kernel over COM, there could be one that's running over a bespoke WebSocket proxied by Jupyter LSP, there could be one running in browser. Then now there's your standard, right? Like you wrap whatever the capabilities are of a specific model in hosted wherever it is in the capability model of LSP, which is already better than Jupyter's capability model. We're still trying to work that through the JEP in terms of what does your kernel support. You would already have all these features and we'd already have the UI. So right now we don't have, for example, code formatting. Jupyter LSP, nobody's built that feature, even though many language servers support that. So Black or Prettier or whatever, whatever the hell the thing is. If you could treat a round trip to a model as a request code formatting, now you've got that whole library of things. People can build muscle memory around it. It could be answered by Black, or it could be answered by, whatever the hell it is that you asked for. But we're missing that one-to-many document, which may be polyglot and contain human languages and other computer languages and other computer languages that talk back to their host environment, right? Like all that nonsense that we've had to do for LSP, which I don't even think the notebook extensions to LSP even handle that well. So I'm not super excited about trying to support those. You know, it would already do that with an existing standard that we wouldn't have to make up. And then the other one I pointed out is people have been asking for and have tried to pay for getting commenting with different intent inside of notebooks and other documents for years, going on a decade now. No one's ever cracked it. Thinking about things as comments that have an owner and they have a unambiguous target in a document, and they can have different intents like approval. So if you're a grader on a NB grader kind of thing, you can approve a specific topic. I don't know. Things like changes. I'm going to think I want to make this change. That could be provided by pull requests that your current document scope is linked to, you know, humans at the other end of the pipe, or not even humans. There could be other buddies, you know, whatever they are, but they have identity. And being able to combine in-browser comments stored directly in the notebook, like you create a notebook comment that's, this is a reference to this other place, and now we know how to look through the comments that are in the notebook metadata and generate a bibtec from that, or anything like that. But again, it's a standard that we didn't build, but that we could implement.
Yeah, the commenting stuff, I remember looking into, you know, we have a commenting extension, but I agree, it's been a lot of conversation has occurred and we don't have it like officially integrated with JupyterLab yet. Okay, any other questions, comments, discussions on Mike's topics here about the completer improvements? Okay. Well, Gabriel is up next. I know I plugged the keyboard brainstorm call at the beginning of this call, but Gabriel, would you like to add about that, because that's starting soon?
Yeah, so I guess I just get to plug it again. Yeah, it's because it's gonna be pretty it's, you know, everyone's invited, it's low key, it's gonna be kind of like one of these meetings, but I just wanted to have like a space to actually talk about one specific thing and allocate time for it. So if you want to, please join. Oh, I should probably, no, I did link. Yes, I did link in the notes to the Team Compass issue, which has the link to this call if you want to like hop off and go get some water or use the restroom or whatever, if you're planning on coming from this call to that one.
And I'll also drop it into the chat so people can find it here. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gabriel. I see someone is currently adding something else to the agenda. Andrea also pasted into the chat a call for additional hosts for the meeting on Team Compass. That's Team Compass issue 197. Andrea is hosting next week. We are looking for new hosts in September. It's easy. You have to hit a button at the top of the meeting and the same button at the bottom of the meeting, and read stuff off the agenda. And
So
we'd love to have you. Go ahead.
yeah, just wanted to remind everyone that if they have a pull request open and they believe that it's in requires a final review, that the major concerns were addressed or hasn't received any attention, please apply status needs review label. That kind of helps us to find those pull requests, and from time to time I'm also adding a list of those into the notes on the weekly meeting minutes. That's only because we have slightly too many open pull requests, and it's difficult to know whether one is still being worked on or not. And another thing that you could do is using the draft and undrafting status to signal that it's open or ready for review or not. But then again, if you don't get a review quickly, just apply the label.
Yeah, thank you for bringing attention to that. We currently have, including drafts, we have 75 open pull requests in JupyterLab as of right now. And 2 of them are tagged with needs review. So please, yeah, please add that tag as a good public service announcement, as folks are mentioning in the notes here. Any other topics that people would like to discuss on the record here? Okay. Hearing nothing, I'm going to stop the recording. Brace yourselves. 3, 2,